That's just my personal. But if they came to me, like part of the questions that I ask in the exploratory sessions will tease out that information. So if I was going to work with you, for example, in the course of our conversation of me asking you certain questions, it will tease out that information where it'll say, oh, well, I have issues with my mother-in-law, or I have issues with my spouse, or I have real issues with the work relationships, or I have issues, or maybe my self-esteem isn't where, because that's a big thing that I work with people, because 80% of success is really the inner game of success. The other 20%, in my opinion anyway, and a lot of other successful people, is the technical aspects of what you want to do it's something that's a skill that can be learned. But the biggest thing is to get that self-esteem, self-confidence up to where it needs to be. Because then you're not afraid to stretch yourself. And I mean, even coming on the show, I had never done this before. It's a good example of jumping outside your comfort zone. Right? This is an example, is one for me. But that's when you learn, and that's when you grow, and that's, it just gets bigger and bigger. And plus your confidence, you get a little more, you're like, wow, I did this thing. I didn't think I could do it, but I did it. Now look. And then if you have a coach, it's like somebody's like cheering you on, saying, hey, I know you could do this. And they see things in you that you don't even see in yourself. And that's the beauty of it. I mean, can you right, I'm sure like you can probably think of, times when in your life when, somebody really made a difference in your life, like a mentor or a role model. Say they saw something in you, you're like, what, are you crazy? And then you said, well, come on, try it. And then you did it, right? And I mean, is there an example of something for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had some people just really believe in me at work. Just some amazing people, and it's that whole "am I crazy?" and the person's like, "No, you're not crazy. You're fine." Just somebody say you're not crazy, because you're like, really? I mean, is this supposed to be like this? No, it's not supposed to be like that. But I've had some wonderful women. I really had a hard time for a while finding, as a woman in business, how I wanted to relate to people, because it seemed like everyone was a caricature. You were either everybody's mother, you were everybody's sexy coworker, which isn't really my thing, but works for some people. There were these caricature woman's roles, and I just never was really comfortable with any of them. And I met some very strong women who were who they were. They found that line, and that was something that really over time I worked through. But having role models and getting that positive reinforcement was really helpful, because you're right, you start to doubt yourself. And it's interesting, and I hate to say this, I don't even know if people mean to do it. I don't think they do, but people want other people to fail, I think. Like some evil little part of them don't want to see people succeed. And so they try to keep you in your box. They're comfortable when you're in your box and when you are behaving as they expect you to behave. I think that's it. And when you start to try to break out of those roles, you get some pretty strong reactions. Like I was in a group of people, and we were all the same level, and we all did the exact same thing for 5 years. And then I was on this project for 5 years. The project ended, and I wanted to get my bachelor's, get my PMP, become a project manager, and kind of step up. And I got really not very affirmative reactions from those people. It was like they weren't comfortable with me moving to the next step. So I found other people who had already achieved those goals and who said, absolutely, you can do this, and we're going to help you put a plan together and achieve it. So sometimes I guess people are more okay with you just staying where you are, which is a shame, because I agree as you do that everybody should be growing all the time.
Yeah, and I think, to answer somebody, just to give you an insight, speaking of insights, one I would share with you is that probably the people that said that to you really you, and they probably were afraid of losing you because you're going to be growing to another level.
That's possible.
And that's in a lot of cases.
I'm sure it was a mix of emotion.
Yeah,
But I'm always like pushing people to spread their wings. I think that's really important. And I see so many people who are younger women in particular, who are going to be great. They've just got to get that courage. They just have to take that step and get the success like you talked about. And I'm constantly like pushing them. to do that, because some people pushed me, and I think that's important. I mean, it'd be great if we lived in a world where everybody pushed themselves, but that's tough. Sometimes you need somebody to give you a kick in the butt.
You do, absolutely. And even, you know, some of the top coaches that I know have, you know, they're just playing at a bigger game. I mean, they might spend $25,000 a year on coaching services. People say, "What, are you nuts?" But they're at a different level in their game where, for them, that's a very, very valuable investment because of what the outcome is going to be. So it's all relative to what level you're at. But it all starts really with your self-esteem and self-confidence. And that's why I do a lot of work, in particular in the beginning stages, with self-confidence and self-esteem. And, you know, once we isolate the areas that they want to focus on in terms of priorities and, you know, the most pressing needs. Because I think a lot of people, they have this idea that they get overwhelmed. They think, oh my God, I got all these things. And it's like, what I get them to do is just to break it down into small, bite-sized, digestible pieces that they can process, they can understand, and that they can develop action plans. Because that's where, you know, once we get all this exploratory stuff done, then we work towards putting together some action plans.
I'm a big fan of the action plan. I'm smiling. My kids are like all the time, oh, you always have to have a plan. I'm big fan of that.
Yeah. Because, you know, the thing is you know, knowledge is power, but it's only the application of knowledge that is going to bring the real power. Because you can have all this wonderful philosophies and ideas, you know, and as I have over the years, kicking around in your head, but if you don't take action on it, it's kind of like it's just wasted. It's just wasted information and energy that you, and then so you're crazy not to use that stuff.
Okay, so that's relationship. So it's like self-relationship, spiritual, physical. Is that predominantly weight loss, or is
usually it really comes down to, it could be health too, because, you know, you may have somebody that has health issues and maybe they realize that if they continue on the same course, that they're going to be setting themselves up for disaster. If you got somebody, for example, if I was working with somebody that had an issue with smoking or drinking or whatever, and they had you know, some bad habits, they know they need to change, I'll work with them on that. So then the physical could be weight loss, could be just changing some bad habits, and looking at why they keep repeating the same thing over and over. You know, you hear the old famous saying, insanity. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, that's what a lot of people in the world do, and the reason they do it, quite honestly, and we've all been, I don't like to use the word guilty, but we've all been kind of guilty of it in a sense, because we do things unconsciously. It's just that we get into these habits. You get up in the morning, you get your cup of coffee, you take a shower, you have your routine, you do your certain things, and it gets comfortable, and you do that all the time. But then all of a sudden, you realize, well, maybe these habits aren't serving me anymore, so I need to like look at doing things a little different. And with a lot of people, they're not likely to change unless there's enough pain in their life. If they're facing a life-threatening illness, and like I've talked with smokers over the years, and they say, "Oh, you know, I knew I should have quit, but then finally one day I ended up intubated on a ventilator, and I could, you know, and I went through hell and back, and now I've decided like that was it. That was their bottom line. So everybody has a different bottom line.
Okay. I'm sorry. What's the fifth one again?
That's
I can't seem to remember
the
today.
Fifth one. Let's see. Did we cover spiritual?
Spiritual, physical,
emotional, financial.
Emotional.
Yeah.
Emotional. We didn't talk about.
Yeah.
What's the difference between emotional and relationship?
Emotional is just more, in the sense, having if your emotions can really serve you, or they can really tear you apart.
Yeah.
And so it's an emotional kind of look at where you are right now in terms of your emotions, and you know what emotions are serving you and what emotions aren't, and how to keep them on an even keel so you're not up and down and up and down. I see so many people, they're on these roller coaster rides. It doesn't need to be that way. And sometimes just having a coach, which I like to think of a coach as kind of like an anchor, like an anchoring point, is, you know, they can call you up and say, "Oh, I'm having these challenges," and it might be, maybe they're all stressed out and emotional about something, and maybe it's just they need a little organization in their life. Maybe they need, you know, time management, things like that. I mean, that's not always the answer, but you get to know, and so a lot of it is just knowing yourself, and you know, a lot of it I think too is self-awareness. Because we do so many things unconsciously. It's when we become consciously aware of it.
Yeah. And
usually it's not, a lot of times we don't on our own, like a good friend of ours that really isn't afraid to be honest with us, we'll say, you know, I got to share something with you, and it's not that comfortable to share it with you, but I care about you, and I really want to see the best for you, and I think this, if I share this with you, and you really embrace this and understand and try to improve upon it, I think you'll really just you'll take off. And you know, the choices a person has, well, they can get real defensive and say, well, oh, that's not me, or you know, and a lot of us do that. We all get in, but have a defensive posture initially. But if you can put your ego aside and say, okay, maybe this person, if the person's speaking from the heart and they really do care about you, and they're giving you some honest advice, to say, okay, well, maybe what if they're right? So okay, so then if they were right, maybe I should, you know, change these habits or change, because a lot of times we're not aware of it. I've had friends or people, you know, point things out to me that I wasn't aware of, and I'm very grateful.